Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the VCU School of Education's 2020 Convocation, and welcome to the new academic year. We had such a wonderful convocation ceremony last year at the Science Museum of Virginia, and we left that event wondering how we were going to top that event, and it looks like COVID-19 had some other plans for us, so we weren't able to identify another venue, obviously because of all of the restrictions, but we're very excited that we can reach everyone today virtually through Zoom. I'll give Aaron a couple seconds here to get our PowerPoint slide deck up.
Well, bear with me for just a moment. I'm so sorry.
I'm not sure if you all have seen the shirts Salt Life and those other type shirts. We probably need to come up with a shirt and call it Zoom Life, because it seems to be the life that we're all living these days. So fantastic. So this, in spite of everything that's happened this year with COVID-19, and it's really been an upheaval for so many of us, and for those of us working in higher education, although we are filled with our challenges, we really are part of a privileged group to some extent. And we, just have to keep in mind that there's so many folks who are really struggling out there. But in spite of all of that, it's really been an exciting time for the VCU School of Education. And it really, truly is my honor to welcome you all here today, our faculty, our staff, alumni, friends, graduate and undergraduate students. Today we celebrate our accomplishments and really get inspired for the year ahead. And it is going to be a big year ahead. I am just so excited. We have a special guest with us today who I know will inspire us, Dr. Maria Pitre-Martin, Superintendent of the Petersburg City Public Schools. Welcome, Dr. Pitre-Martin, and just thank you so very much for taking time from your busy schedule to be with us here today. And we truly look forward to your inspiring words.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Fantastic. there are a few things that I want us to celebrate today. The first one being the VCU School of Education was recently ranked number 8 for best online graduate education programs and number 16 best public graduate school of education by the U.S. News and World Report. While this ranking is only one thing that shows the quality of our school, it does demonstrate not only the exceptional quality of our faculty, our staff, and our students, but it also confirms the strength of supports that we provide to distant learners. Through the hard work of our faculty, our centers, with the support of the Office of Research and Faculty Development, last year in fiscal year 20, the School of Education generated approximately $30 million in external awards, and we're second only to the School of Medicine here at VCU. Our school has seen a consistent increase in external awards over the last decade, winning grants from the likes of the U.S. Department of Education, the Social Security Administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, the National Science Foundation, and that's just to name a few. All of this is truly something we must celebrate because it not only allows us to advance our research, but it allows us to provide opportunities for our students. Another way that we demonstrate our quality and leadership as a school of education is by driving meaningful change in how we prepare educators and other professionals. We have previously expressed our solidarity with the recent anti-racist protests and efforts to eradicate structural and systemic racism. And as a leader, and particularly as a leader of the School of Education, we support this movement not just with words, but with our actions. As part of that, we've made the following commitments for the upcoming year. Better understanding racial, implicit, and institutional bias, along with white fragility and white superiority, while working towards preparing our school's leadership to become anti-racist leaders. Providing training and learning opportunities for our faculty and staff on these issues to ensure a more equitable and inclusive environment for faculty, staff, and students. We want to make sure that we're amplifying the voice of underrepresented minorities and all students by continuing our student forums and town halls. We're investing in the continued growth of our Home Scholars Program. We're ensuring that we have diverse pools of strong candidates to further diversify our faculty and staff here in the School of Education. We're also committed to rooting out and addressing implicit and institutional biases that exist in our school related to graduate assistantship assignments, evaluation processes, search and salary inequities, and that's just to name a few. We're excited to support the work of the Minority Education, Recruitment, Retention, and Equity Center and have pledged to sustain the center beyond its current funding. And we're currently working with the VCU Office of Integrity and Compliance and with input from some of our students to create a portal for students to submit their concerns related to implicit bias and racial injustice within the school. These are ambitious tasks, but one that we think is critically important for us to truly have the type of environment where everyone can flourish and reach their true levels of excellence. In addition, our Office of Strategic Engagement is rolling out a Becoming an Anti-Racist Educator professional development series for educators in our community, and we're developing a plan for our faculty and staff to engage with this program. Our School of Education graduates also have to be leaders in this area. We have to be, we have the commitment and the values and the value systems to do this work that will lead to change in our society. And that change will begin with ourselves. So I'm excited about the work taking place within our schools. I'm excited about our resolve and I'm excited about our commitment. It is now my pleasure to welcome the following faculty and staff to our RAM family. I'd like to welcome Dr. Kevin Clay, Assistant Professor, Department of Foundations of Education, and he joined us this past spring. Dr. Luciana de Oliveira, Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning, who I believe today might be her 50th day. She joined us last month. And I'd also like to welcome Faith Wilkinson, Dr. Faith Wilkinson, Program Director in the Minority Education Center, who also joined us last spring. And I can tell you, these folks have really hit the ground running in their incredible contributions to the school. Speaking of faculty, we have so many outstanding faculty, and I would like to recognize the accomplishments of a few of those faculty members. Kevin Sutherland, professor in the Department of Counseling and Special Education, is co-principal investigator on a $3.1 million grant from the National Institute of Mental Health to study whether evidence-based mental health programs in schools continue after research support is removed. And this was announced in July 2020, but this is such a significant award that I felt it was important for us to mention that again. And congratulations to LaRon Scott, Associate Professor in the Department of Counseling and Special Education, for helping to secure nearly $500,000 grant from the National Center for Teacher Residencies, leading to the formation of the Minority Education Center, a safe space, especially for Black educators, to receive the support they need to be successful. And also congratulations to LaRon on being named the center's executive director. The following faculty were awarded COVID-19 Rapid Response Research Grants from our Central VCU Research Office earlier this year. Dwayne Cormier, who's Assistant Professor in the Department of Foundations of Education and also an ICUBE Scholar. Yao Ying Shu, Professor in the Department of Counseling and Special Education, and Rachel Gomez, Assistant Professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning, and also an ICUBE Scholar, along with co-principal investigators Andreen Castro, Assistant Professor in the Department of Education Leadership, and ICUBE Scholar, along with Dr. Cormier. And these were announced back in April and May of 2020, and we're really excited that of the number of these rapid research grants that the School of Education received, particularly comparing to other units here in the university. Fresh off the press, Dr. Abigail Conley, Associate Professor in the Department of Counseling and Special Education, she recently won the 2020 Association for Counselor Education and Supervision Research Grant Award. So congratulations to you, Dr. Conley, on that. And lastly, I'd like to recognize two faculty members who were recognized earlier this year by the American Counseling Association. First, Donna Gibson, Department Chair and Professor in the Department of Counseling and Special Education, received ACA's Extended Research Award in 2020, and Mary Herman, Associate Professor in the Department of Counseling and Special Education, was recently granted the status of ACA Fellow, which is the highest honor awarded by that organization. And those were announced April of 2020. In addition to outstanding faculty, we definitely have outstanding staff here in the School of Education, and just want to recognize a few of those folks. Kelsey Coleman, an HR coordinator in our Office of Human Resources, was named co-chair of the VCU-wide Human Resources Career Community. And in addition, she recently earned her Society of Human Resource Management professional certification. So congratulations, Kelsey. And Ben also, who's a program coordinator for the Asian American Educational Studies Center, for organizing and launching a weekly workshop on Chinese language and culture. Because of the hard work of the staff at our Child Development Center, the center recently received reaccreditation through the National Association for Education of Young Children, and this is the gold standard in early childhood education. So we're so proud of Dr. Thomas Beatty, the director, and his outstanding team there for that very prestigious reaccreditation. There are only 12 centers in the Richmond area with this designation. Several of our outstanding School of Education students have been recognized for their accomplishments as well, including Corey Nikolai, a doctoral student in our PhD in Educational Psychology program and member of the Home Scholars Program. She recently received the Doctoral Scholars Fellowship from the Southern Regional Education Board. Melissa Cuba, our recent graduate and other home scholar. She graduated in May from the PhD in Curriculum, Culture, and Change. And she was the recipient of our School of Education's Distinguished Dissertation Award for the 2019-2020 academic year, and was recently hired as a postdoc within our Metropolitan Educational Research Consortium. Stavera Clark, who is pursuing her EDD in leadership in our school while teaching in VCU School of Social Work, was one of only 5 recipients university-wide of the VCU 2020 Presidential Awards for Community Multicultural Enrichment. And also Katie Brandley, a doctoral student in our special education, or actually recent graduate in our special education and disability leadership program, was presented with the Division of International Special Education and Services Distinguished Student Leadership Service Award earlier this year at the Council for Exceptional Children's 2020 Convention and Expo in Portland, Oregon. So time definitely won't allow me to highlight the incredible work of all of our faculty, staff, and students, but definitely wanted to just share a few with you today. Now I'd like to invite Kathy Rudisil, our Senior Associate Dean for Research and Faculty Development, to announce those faculty members who have achieved promotion or tenure in 2020. Kathy?
Thank you, Dr. Dare. I'm excited to announce we have 3 promotions to announce this year. The first is Dr. Kurt Stemhagen, promoted to professor in the Department of Foundations of Education. The second is our new Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Dr. Luciana de Oliveira. She was appointed as a professor here with her new position in the Department of Teaching and Learning. And finally, we have our new promotion of Dr. Carol Schall. She's been promoted to Associate Professor in the VCU Rehabilitation Research and Training Center and the Autism Center for Excellence. So congratulations to all 3 of you, and we are excited that you have moved forward in your careers here at VCU.
Fantastic. Congratulations again, Kurt, Luciana, and Carol. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Joan Rhodes, Chair of the Department of Teaching and Learning, to introduce our keynote speaker today.
Thanks, Dr. Dare. Dr. Marie Pitre-Martin currently serves as the Superintendent of the Petersburg City Public Schools in Virginia. And before that, she served as the Deputy State Superintendent and the Chief Academic and Digital Learning Officer for the North Carolina Department of Education, serving approximately 1.5 million students. Prior to serving in these positions, she was the Superintendent of Schools for the Thomasville City School District in North Carolina. During her tenure in Thomasville, the graduation rate increased 12% to an all-time high, and the district saw double-digit gains in test scores. Before working in Thomasville, she served as the North Carolina State Director of K-12 Curriculum and Instruction, the Chief Academic Officer for the School District of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, and an Assistant Superintendent for the East Baton Rouge Parish School System in Louisiana. Dr. Pitre-Martin, a Broad Superintendent's Academy Fellow, has a PhD in Educational Administration from Texas A&M University. As a principal in College Station, Dr. Pitre-Martin was named the Texas Middle School Principal of the Year and was one of the youngest presidents of the Texas Association of Secondary School Principals. She lives in Virginia with her loving husband, Ken, and her two dogs, Baby and Duchess. Welcome, Dr. Pitre-Martin.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you all today. And it is an incredible honor for me to be with you all today and just share a few nuggets that I have gained through my 31 years of being in education. This year is my 31st year of being in education, and I have been very fortunate to have been mentored by some excellent educational leaders in multiple states. And one of the things that a mentor once said to me is that in education, we have a tendency to do a lot of talking about what it is we are going to do. We have to be able to back that up with action, because we know the action is going to move us forward. And sometimes that is easier said than done. So today, the theme of my comments, which are really lessons that I have learned through my 31 years of being in the field of education, is that I can show you better than I can tell you. And we need to be focused on what actions show that all students matter each and every day, regardless of the walk of life that they come from. And there are very key strategic ways that we can make that happen. So as we go into the next slide, once again, I want us to keep in mind that a guiding principle for us as educators has to be showing our stakeholders what we can do far better than we can ever tell them. When you go to the next slide, you will see that there are three distinct ways that we can do this. And as young educators, pre-service educators, when I started my career as a high school English teacher, I wish someone would have told me these things before I started, because I would have been a far better teacher. And that is, I need to use data strategically. I need to dig into the data to ensure that I'm meeting the needs of all of my students. I need to respond to student work very strategically, and words matter. How we talk to children really matter. When we're giving them feedback regarding student work, our words matter. And finally, we need to provide opportunities beyond the core. For many years, I have been around educators who sometimes believe that just teaching the core and the basics is really what we're there to do as educators. And over my years, I have learned it's far more than that. And so I do want to spend a little bit of time discussing that today. So let's start off talking about using data strategically. The first thing that I really want to encourage all of our pre-service teachers to do is to always think about knowing your students and what are you going to do in a very intentional way to get to know your students. Knowing where they come from, what are their interests, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, and going through a CUME folder does not do that for you. You have to really spend time getting to know students. And I really, really want to encourage you that this is one of the key takeaways that through the years is solid and true. But along with knowing our students, I'm going to ask us to always preempt our implicit bias regarding children. Children are not what they look like. Children are not what they sound like. Children are not the clothing that they wear. Children are not necessarily always, you know, the apple doesn't fall from the tree You know, you will hear people say things like that. At the end of the day, you've got to get to know students and also know that any implicit bias that you might have will come through in how you're communicating with young people. So we need to preempt that, know what our biases might be or are, and then we have to learn about positive representations for all of our students. And then finally, we have to frame and challenge ourselves and have some personal ground rules for looking at data. When I first started teaching as a high school teacher, we very often looked at data in the aggregate. And in doing that, we thought we were being so successful. In reality, we were not digging into all forms of data. We were focused on standardized tests. We weren't even asking what other data might be out there. Also, we were not disaggregating data in a way that we were looking at categories to make sure we were not losing any students along the way. So when you enter that classroom, you have to know, first and foremost, I'm going to tackle data. I'm going to do it aggressively. And I'm not going to use it to make the sole decision, but I am going to think about it in a very strategic way and know who your students are. So you have to use data very strategically. I wish I would have known that my very first year as a teacher. Next, I want us to think about responding to student work strategically. Words matter. How we talk to children matter. What we write on their assignments matter. We have to be instructive in nature. We have to talk to students. We have to explain things to students. This takes a lot of time, and it also gets better with practice. I was a high school English teacher. I understood the power of the red pen. So with that in mind, I was going to have to shift gears, not necessarily use that red pen, and be able to give students feedback that really was instructive, making sure that I was sensitive to the individual needs of my students, and then also referencing a skill or a specific knowledge. When I first started teaching, I might have given feedback on 5 different skills that I saw students needed to tackle in a writing assignment. Looking back on that, I really needed to help students focus. So again, wish I'd known that my first year as a high school teacher. And also giving feedback to keep students on target for achievement, always knowing what the end goal is and staying focused. And then finally, words matter. I cannot say that enough. At the end of this, please take this away. Words matter. And we have to give genuine praise to our students and always remember that very often one negative can do a student in and take many positives in order to have that student forget the one negative. So we have to continue to praise, and we have to continue to support our students through this process. And then finally, I want to reference something that, again, as a first-year teacher, I really hope that I would have truly understood. And this is something we're working on in Petersburg City Public Schools. And for all of you out there ready to enter the field of teaching, please consider what we're doing in Petersburg City Public Schools that might be different. And that is providing opportunities to go beyond the core. In an Ed Week article in 2016, it was stated that there's a core knowledge that children need to build on for them to reach their potential. However, beyond this core, there are unlimited paths for children to explore. So the question then becomes, are we certain that what we really want in this country is more than 50 million public school children who meet the same academic goals? Is that really what we're going for? And that's a question we have to all ask ourselves. Yes, there needs to be a baseline, but isn't one of our goals as educators to push kids beyond the core? So we have to be prepared as educators to go beyond that core in providing our students with a multitude of opportunities. True opportunities that help our students develop a level of expertise in an area of interest that is really special to them. So for example, in Petersburg City Public Schools, we have an initiative called Diploma Plus. What that means is that our students will be able to get a plus beyond the high school diploma. And this is going to be based on what their career goals are and what their opportunities are and where we're trying to also push them to be. We could just sit back and say, good job, you got a high school diploma. We all know a high school diploma in today's society really will not get you where you need to be. So we have to tell our students up front that we want to give them a plus and push them to walk out with that high school diploma, plus a credential, dual enrollment credit, or an associate's degree, so that they can move on to the next phase of their lives. These things might seem small when you see them on paper, but when you put them all together, it creates a different learning experience for our students. So as we have our graduates who are graduating from the School of Education, and this is such an exciting time for you, and you are heading into the world, I would ask some critical things of you. You need to know yourself. You need to know what your biases are. You need to know what your capacities are, and you need to know as you enter that teaching world where you are with things like providing student feedback, the words you're going to use, and how you're going to use all types of data to inform good decision-making in regards to students. You also need to know exactly how you're going to get to know your students. They're not a number, and they're certainly just not a mark in a roll book. And so you're going to have to strategically plan for getting to know your students. And then when you enter that profession, that strategic data use and that meaningful and instructive student feedback, you put those two pieces together and you can take children to places they might have thought they couldn't go. So please remember, know yourself, know your students, and be prepared to focus on that data and giving positive student feedback that's instructive. On the side of our institutions of higher learning, working with our pre-service teachers to ensure that they're ready to go. How do we prepare our educators to go beyond the core? Is that a conversation we even have with our pre-service teachers? I can tell you that when I was training in my teacher ed program, no one talked to me about pushing my children beyond the core. If I saw a student with great aptitude, no one had trained me on what to do differently to push them to the next level. This is critically important so that we can get students to truly where they can be and where they want to be. Also for our schools of education, how are we working with educators to be strategic data users? Very often when I'm in a room with educators and you talk data, eyes glaze over. This is something we have got to embrace and not run from. And it's a lot of reasons that we need to embrace it, but we need our schools of education to help our students so when they walk into our schools, they're not scared, eyes won't glaze over, and they're ready to tackle it and look at it in many different ways. And then finally, I would love to see our schools of education preparing our educators to give that meaningful, instructive student feedback where words really do matter to push children to improvement, push them to increased achievement. There's so much research out there regarding what good student feedback can do to improve not only academic performance, but also the confidence that students have in their own self-efficacy to do the work. Critically important for all of us. So as we think about some of the things I've shared, it's all about action, right? We need to be able to show people better than we could ever tell them how we're going to motivate students and how we're going to push them to the next level. As I proceed with closing out today, I always love to share this story about my first grade teacher, Mrs. Vidrine. I loved this person. I just thought she was absolutely a phenomenal educator. She was older. You could tell she had taught for several years, and she really appeared to give a lot of care and attention to us as students. But there was one day she came by my desk and she was handing out math assignments to all of the students in class. She knelt down next to my desk and she looked at me and she said, "I know this is difficult for you, but do the best you can." I'm pausing here to let that sink in. Now, there was really no reason for her to think I couldn't do it, but the minute those words came out of her mouth, what do you think I thought about myself? I would love to see your comments in the chat box. What is it that comment might have done for me, my self-esteem, where I was headed? And I will tell you that at the age of 54, I still remember that exchange with that teacher. And as you were typing in, it was demotivating, it was deficit thinking, it was definitely not a growth mindset. And again, this was a teacher I adored and thought she was phenomenal, but in that very moment, she said something that made me think differently about who I was. And what I guess she didn't know is that I came from a home in which education was a huge priority, to the point when I got home, my mother had a series of flashcards that we generally went through before we had dinner. So in my mind, I was pretty on top of things. And so to hear that comment was just very demoralizing. So words matter. The feedback we give to our students matter. Knowing our students enough to know that's probably not the right thing I should be saying to that student or any student. Those things are so significant. So again, our actions mean a lot, our words mean a lot, and we have to ensure we're doing the right things. And this grows with time and with practice. But if we're not intentional and strategic, certainly we won't improve. I love this quote, I really do, from Gandhi, that says, "It's the action, not the fruit of the action, that's important." You have to do the right thing. It may not be in your power, may not be in your time, that there will be any fruit. But that doesn't mean you stop doing the right thing. You may never know what results come from your action. But if you do nothing, there will be no result. So it is critical that, yes, we might not see incredible improvement right there that school year, but positive student feedback that's instructive, using that data strategically, going beyond the core, these are things that are life-changing. And it could happen in a year. That student might flourish 2 years from that year, but it will make a difference. So I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be with you all this evening and just to share some of the things that I have learned over my time in education. This is one of the best careers you could ever be in, because every time you look into the face of a child, you're looking into the face of hope, which I love each and every day. So thank you all for having me, and I think we're going to have question and answer time.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Pitre-Martin. You know, you've charged us with using data strategically getting to know our students, you know, words matter. So strategically responding to students in and through meaningful and instructive feedback. And I think that's an important message, not just for our teacher candidates, but I think that really applies, you know, to our faculty. I think it applies to our staff. I think that's something that applies to all of us. So we're We're so appreciative of your words, and we're so glad that you've agreed to stay with us to answer a few questions. So I'll begin with a few that we received from some folks earlier this week. The first question is, what would be the best way for faculty in the School of Education to offer their support to Petersburg City Schools as you navigate reopening during COVID-19?
There are several ways that we would love to have support from our schools of education. You know, as we've done our research to prepare to go totally virtual, at least for the first 9 weeks of school, we have done quite a bit of searching for quality materials to support our parents on this virtual transition. I will tell you that as students have come through to pick up their devices and their hotspots, we notice that our students will literally jump on immediately. They will register for their Zoom link, and they're off and running. And this is like a fifth grader who's able just to navigate. But we have been hard pressed to find quality materials that coach our parents on how to navigate the virtual world of Zoom, a learning management system, even setting up an email account, because we know that some of our children are being raised with relatives who might be older. And so they didn't grow up with this constant use of technology. So one piece, it would be wonderful if somebody could provide us with a user-friendly parent guide for how to really tackle virtual learning. The second piece is always good professional development is needed for our staff in the area of using learning management systems. How do you teach differently in a virtual environment? What are the do's and don'ts of working in a virtual environment? And then I would say the third piece, and I know that Merck is working on this, we know that our students have been under significant strain during this time. Some of our families have been displaced. Some of our family members, they have lost jobs. So they have gone through a lot of serious trauma in many cases. So we know that we will start the year with the social emotional learning curriculum that our students will be taking, just like it's a math course or a reading course. But the next phase of this transition will be when they return face-to-face. So what does that look like to provide the next tier of social emotional learning support as they re-enter face-to-face? So the continued research that I think is being done in that area is going to be desperately needed. So I would say those three things: parent support, professional learning, and SEL.
Fantastic, thank you. Let me get to another question we have here. So the role of a superintendent can be isolating for any new superintendent in our siloed system of local control, and the circumstances for Black female leaders can exacerbate that condition. How have you found the double jeopardy of Black female leadership manifesting since starting this role? And can you share any examples of how both the local Petersburg and statewide Virginia context have either challenged or supported you as a leader in an identity affirming way? It's kind of a big question.
That is a big question, but it is a wonderful question. This is kind of the unspokenness of the job that people don't really talk about openly. But it is definitely something that I think about. I don't think about it as much as I did, for example, 10 years ago or during my first superintendency. I have told many folks that if this were my first superintendency in the midst of COVID-19, I don't know what I would do, to be real honest. Luckily, I've had enough context in the superintendency that I have been able to move and navigate and pivot, because you have to pivot so much in the superintendency. And then with COVID-19, the pivot is even more extreme because things are changing so much. So to answer the question about the transition here to Virginia, I will say that the state has a lot of things that are very different compared to other states. School finance and funding is very different than any state I've ever worked in, and this is my 5th state. So you have to always step back and take time to learn these things. But fortunately, I have had the support of the state superintendent as well as other superintendents to navigate. There are several female superintendents in Region 1, and they have been a huge support for me. But I think, you know, as you grow in leadership, I think it's important that people put themselves in position based on the experience they have. And of course, coming to Petersburg, I had been a local superintendent and the deputy state superintendent. So I think those skills that I learned through those processes have put me in a pretty good position as I've come on board. So yes, you want the support of the state and other leaders, but also you need to make sure when you take positions, your skills match the position at that particular time. So I hope I've answered that question. But as I said, 31 years in a previous superintendency, I think it has served me well. If this was my first superintendency, I'd have a different response.
Great, thank you. And a third question, what strategies do you use to recruit and retain African-American leadership and teachers outside of the standard HR practices in terms of recognizing the makeup of leadership teams, principals, and teaching staff?
That's a wonderful question, and that's something we're continuing to work on in Petersburg. This year we had PAC, which is the Petersburg Aspiring Administrators Cohort, in which anyone who was a teacher who was aspiring to any kind of leadership position, whether it's a central office coach or an assistant principal or principal, we wanted to be able to take them through a series of leadership courses to gauge if they were really ready for leadership. And that has been a good tool for us to determine those folks who are ready to lead, or folks who may not have the master's degree or mid-management certification yet, but they have the aptitude for leadership and the desire to lead. So we're going to continue to do that again this year and establish PAC again this year to groom and kind of pinpoint those who definitely want to lead. The other thing that I think is really, really important is outright recruitment of people. I have worked in some school districts and in some states where recruiting staff is a major no-no from district to district. I guess because I've worked in many different states, I keep up with the good work that people are doing in divisions. I ask a lot of questions. I talk to a lot of people. And being open to recruiting folks who you know have the right disposition and skill set is critically important. Posting an HR job description is not it. I mean, you have to do that because people have to apply. But if that is your sole strategy to get leaders, it's not going to work for you. You have to be actively recruiting. When you go to events and you meet people, you have to take cards, you have to be in contact with folks, you have to have people who are already on your leadership team recruiting. Who do you know? Who's good? Who's up and coming? Oh, we need to give them a call. And you just have to constantly be in that mode. So do your Grow Your Own, which is our PAC program, but then you also have to constantly and actively be recruiting. I'm a fan of interviewing folks, and you may not fit the job that you applied for based on the interview, and then looking at your skill set and recommending something else. So I've been known to do that. I look at skill set, and then I tend to put people where I think they fit. Some people don't like that approach, but it has worked for me through the years. So.
Great. Well, I'm particularly excited about our new BSED programs, which in terms of a teacher pipeline standpoint, does afford us the opportunity in our School of Education to really work with those students at greater depth from their freshman year through their senior year. And we've got some outstanding faculty who are just making incredible contributions in that area. And I'm also excited about the work with Drs. LaRon Scott and Faith Wilkerson in our Minority Education Center. And if they've not already reached out, I'm sure they will, in seeing how they and we can really support those efforts, because that's a critical issue. And I know I've charged our recruitment team in developing pipeline programs for teacher educators in general, but also for underrepresented minority teachers. I do have someone sent me a question, and I think we might have time for one or two more questions. What is a strategy, or maybe a few strategies, that you have seen be successful in involving parents in their children's day-to-day education?
Mm-hmm. And that is a tough one, and you have to work at that constantly. And we have to be careful with our perception of what involvement means. Because for some parents who are working 2 and 3 and maybe even 4 jobs, which in our community is not uncommon, very often making sure that the student has what they need for school is involvement. They may not be able to come up to the school regularly, but that is definitely involvement. So we always have to be very careful about our definition of involvement. But I will tell you that the key piece for me, regardless of how you define involvement, is the parents' willingness to engage with school staff. Whether it is through email, text message, class dojo, all of this different ways, social media, that we have to communicate. When a parent is communicating with school staff, they are involved. Now, that involvement can grow from there, but to me, that is the first step. Here in Petersburg City Public Schools, we are working really, really hard to make our schools so welcoming that our parents just want to talk to us regularly and have conversations with us regularly, whether it's a email or whether it's talking to us on the phone or social media, but just making sure they're willing to chat so that they know the progress their student is making and they're supporting the work that we're doing. To me, that's step one. And you can do that a lot of different ways, but the first step is making your school totally open and welcoming. I cannot tell you how exciting it was on August 15th in the pouring down rain at Petersburg High School in the parking lot. We had cars parked over the hill on Johnson Road coming to get back to school supplies and just to say hello. It was a honk your horn drive-through. So if you're excited about school starting, honk your horn. And people just came through the parking lot. And we were waving in our raincoats. I mean, it gives me chills just to talk about it. That is parent involvement. And so looking at, we don't have to be so stuck in our view. We have to open up our perception. And it was a wonderful day. So.
Fantastic. That's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
One question, another question, sorry. You mentioned, that it would have been really challenging if you were a new superintendent coming in during COVID. Mm. What are 1 or 2 lessons from your experiences that you would tell your younger self about your career and workplace as a superintendent?
So there are moments in your career as a superintendent that you have to switch from being consultative or collaborative to being very directive. And very often when you're a brand new superintendent, yes, the collaboration is important, But in the midst of a pandemic, there are just some decisions that have to be made. And you have to go straight to that directive mode. And so I knew that going through this process, as opposed to maybe my first 6 months as a superintendent. So that was one lesson that I knew. The second is the power of structure in organization and having people all on the same page. You learn that over time, how important that is. So through this process, we started with the reopening of schools team. They met every single week. They had 11 different categories of information they had to be working on every single week. That level of structure for me has tightened up so much more in my second superintendency than in my first, because now I know the importance of it, especially in a crisis. So those are some of the things that over time you just learn. And because you might have had the experiences before, you go into autopilot. And definitely those things have served us all well in that we've been able to rally very quickly and push out a significant amount of work.
Great, fantastic. Last question. How do you deal with the dropout rate that has been a problem in Petersburg? And I'll take the liberty of adding a follow-up question to that. What, if anything, could we do to help here at VCU with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I arrived, I discovered that we had 700 students. Now we have about 4,000 in the district. We had about 700 students who were overaged for their grade level. And of the 700, 225 were at the high school, meaning they were overage and undercredited. We have 177 at the middle school. So what that tells us is that for whatever reason, we have a large group of students who have fallen incredibly behind. What does that lead to? Dropout. So what we're working on this year is what we're calling Blandford 2.0, because Blandford is the title of our alternative schools. So this is a new version of an alternative program to make sure that students who are overage and undercredited at the high school actually can receive some workforce development through the Community College Workforce Alliance. So if our students are 18 or older, they're able to go through that program. They can receive certifications and things like logistics, OSHA certification, and et cetera, and actually go into the world of work as an 18-year-old making $15 an hour. So what we have discovered is that in order to keep our students engaged, we have to prepare them for the world of work. And we have to do that while they're with us and not wait until they're ready to graduate. So that's where we're moving, and that's where we're headed to hopefully keep our students. But while they're working on their CCWA certification, they're also going to be working on a self-paced curriculum to get those credits that they are missing as well. Seat time is not working for them because in reality, if you are 19 and you only have 10 credits, there's a good chance you might hit 20 or 21 before you're able to graduate if we just do the traditional path. So we've got to do something different, and different for us will be a self-paced curriculum online with the CCWA to get them trained to go into the world of work. So that's what we're working on. But as a university, it would be wonderful to have you all partner with us on any additional opportunities for our students. And this goes back to my third point of the presentation. We've got to go beyond the core and being able to provide our students with opportunities that show them that they can do more. And so I would love to sit with you, Dr. Dare, and others and think through what could that extra be that VCU could provide us. So while they're getting their credential for workforce readiness, is there anything we could be doing to get them prepped for entry-level college courses as well? Because, you know, going into the world of work is fine, but there should be other options. You might want to go to work to put yourself through college. And we're fine with that as well. So we want to prepare them for both.
You know, in listening to your responses to your questions, particularly the last question, it's just so impressive how you practice what you preach, because what you're talking about or what you spoke about is using data strategically getting to know your students and strategically responding to your students' needs. And so I just think that's outstanding. You know, in your presentation, in your PowerPoint, I believe it was twice, you showed on a slide, I can show you better than I can tell you.
Yes.
And I think you've showed us here during this small amount of time, you've showed us a little of the great leadership that you're bringing to Petersburg. And I just want to let you know that the VCU School of Education, that we really stand ready to support. I'm real excited of the work that RTR is doing in Petersburg. I know that Al Byers has connected with folks in Petersburg, and we all had a meeting. I guess it was last year, and we're probably due to have another meeting. But you know, as we're growing these new BSED programs, I think we have those opportunities of building rich opportunities for us to make sure that we're providing our students meaningful co-curricular experiences that can really reach into the school division. And so I think those opportunities are there. So just so very excited to have you spend this small amount of time with us. I am confident, if it hasn't happened already, that our ed leadership folks are going to be reaching out to you to come in to guest lecture in the classes, because I think you dropped quite a few nuggets of ed leadership knowledge that I think would be valuable, along with.
Yes, a few are reaching out at this point in the chat box. This is wonderful.
Yeah, so it's just exciting. So before I close, I do want to mention something that wasn't in my remarks, and thank you, Donna Gibson, for reminding me of this. But this year, the School of Education is launching the first PhD in special education program in Virginia. And I'm just, that has been a labor of love that started well before I got here. So, but we're really excited about that. And again, it just speaks to, you know, how responsive we want to be in addressing the needs of all of our school divisions, but that we really have to lean into those with the greatest needs. So as we begin the fall semester, you know, we have to contend with the realities of COVID-19, and you know, so our priorities are the health, safety, and wellness, both physical and emotional, for our faculty, staff, and students. And we understand that an in-person return, you know, may be stressful for some, but I know that we will have a successful year. It really is going to require all of us to follow through on the safety requirements and precautions that we have put in place. It's going to take our faculty being responsive to the needs of our students. It's going to take our administration being responsive to the needs of our faculty and staff. So this very much is a collective team effort. And so we'll need every member of our VCU School of Education community to follow guidelines related to wearing masks and disinfecting your spaces and washing your hands often and maintaining physical distance and remembering your daily health checks through daily health www.vcu.edu. I also want to give just a very, very special thanks and appreciation to our students, just for your resilience, your patience, and your ongoing commitments to your communities and your ongoing commitments to each other. You are the reason that VCU and the School of Education continue to work even in times of these unprecedented uncertainties. So thank you, and to our ceaselessly dedicated faculty and staff, who have led and supported our students and colleagues in so many ways with just an incredible spirit. You know, from back in March when this pandemic hit, I mean, our faculty and staff just pivoted and continues to pivot to meet those needs. So just deeply appreciative and just a deep sense of pride to be the dean for the VCU School of Education. This is my 5th year. I have significantly more gray hair, but I hope it's wisdom. But just an incredible sense of pride, both when I have these types of opportunities where we get to speak to the large community, an incredible sense of pride when I sit around the table at Council of Deans with other deans and I see the incredible work that we're doing to lean into racial justice and equity and just all the things that we're doing. So I'm just deeply appreciative, humbled, with just a great sense of pride. So thank you to everyone for being with us today. We hope you enjoyed our fall 2020 virtual convocation. I look forward to us being together again in person once it is safe. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that, you know, the spring semester might be back to normal. We are already starting to have conversations of how we might be able to do a social distance graduation in December. So just know that you all and your needs are front and center for us. So I wish you all a great semester and another productive academic year. And thank you, and God bless each and every one of you all. Thank you so much.